Okay, so let's do today's lesson. This morning's lesson, anyway. So what we're going to look at today is composing objects from other objects, inheriting behavior and state from another class. So both of these are techniques for reusing code. Calling a parent class with super, using mix-ins and modules, that's another reuse mechanism that we have, and using require to import other Ruby source files. So we'll look at how we can, because so far we've been putting everything in one file, haven't we? So in practice, any sort of reasonably sized app, that's going to become unmaintainable very quickly. So in practice, what we do is we split it up into separate files, and then when we need something out of this file, we require it into this one over here, so we can make use of it. So we'll see how we can do that as well.
And that's best practice for be able to reuse that same thing.
Exactly. Yep. Absolutely. All right. All right. So now, when we were using normal methods, so outside of a class, back when we were using global methods, you recall that one of the things we were able to do inside of a method was call other methods. Right? I think we all did that at some point, didn't we? Had a method call another method to do something. So we can do the same thing with classes and objects. So we can, in a sense, compose a class of other classes. So we can use a class within another class. And it's called composition for that reason. Because we're composing functionality in a class out of other classes. Okay, so let's have a go at that. Now, do we have? We did a person class the other day, didn't we? If I remember rightly. Let's go to the we did. Okay, so open your classes RB file. You should still have it there somewhere from the other day. You remember we created this person. Okay, down here.
Do you want to copy and paste that in the code
Can you put that in the chat?
I can, yep. So I'll give you that as a snippet if you don't have it.
Soon we'll have GitHub, and this will not be an issue.
Okay.
If it's soon, they'll know GitHub, and this won't be an issue.
Yes, that's right.
All
Yep.
that stuff.
Yep. You just pull it down from there. Okay, so this is classes.rb. Whew, it worked. That time you do Command C instead of Command V.
Yeah, not
And
so
lose what you had on the clipboard.
Oh no.
Okay, what I'll do is I'll strip out the rest of the code here. Actually, no, I'll leave that in because you're going to need that for revision. So I'll create the snippet. Oh, by the way, if you're going to create a code snippet in here, never leave it on auto detect. So you know how it's got over here, you've got auto detect type. Never leave it on that. It's crap at guessing. Okay, it really is. Always go and explicitly choose the language. Okay, cool. So have we all got that? Alright, so you should have this person class in there. Okay, so it takes a name and a date of birth, and we've got accessors for that. There's an about me, which constructs a nice little string for us. And we've got a change method as well, so that we can update the two at the same time. We've got a custom setter for date of birth, which makes sure that we're passing in an integer and not some other type of data. So it has a little bit of validation going on there. And then we've got to say hello. Alright, we're just creating a couple of people down here just to test it out. Alright, the say hello takes another instance of the person as a parameter. Okay, has anybody got any questions on that class at this point before we proceed? Okay. So what I'm going to do is just above your person class, we're going to declare another class called address. And I'm going to want to initialize that. Oh, by the way, I don't have to type the whole thing in, the whole structure. If I just go down to that one, just type init and select class in it, it actually drops the whole thing in along with the class, which I don't really want this time. I only wanted the method. But if I didn't have the class there, if I hadn't already typed that, I could have just gone init tab and had the basic class structure with the initialize method ready to go. And then I just change the class name. Okay.
These level of code snippets might feel like it, but it's definitely not cheating. That's how you get quicker as a developer, is never rewriting anything or reinventing the wheel when you can just have it there. When I'm creating HTML pages, for example, I just type HTML5 and then press tab and it automatically creates a structure of a web page for me. Like, it's something I've done dozens of times. You don't need to keep doing it.
Alright, so we're going to pass in a street, a city, and a postcode. And we'll copy those into corresponding instance variables. You would call that zip code if you're American.
Let's not go down that rabbit hole. There's a lot of these. Like,
You reckon it might trigger your car?
Let's not forget the Imperial.
oh, that would be.
Alright. Become a very small planet though, hasn't it? Lately. It's like, you know, there's all these different, you know, it's very multicultural.
It's a
Yeah,
nuclear
you know,
planet.
and you know, we've got cross-pollination of languages and dialects and all this kind of thing, and
Yeah,
I actually think it's a really good thing.
Oh, I don't know. Like, whatever's happening over the UK with their English, they can keep that. That's just me.
All the people that actually invented
Me and my family are all British, and my brother actually had a friend round yesterday.
Yeah.
That's the first time he's had the friend round, and we kept talking and stuff. And every like 5 minutes, the friend was like, "What is that? What are you talking about?"
Oh, really?
And it's
Does it
only
change
then
that
I
much?
realized that like me and my brother, when we get around each other, like there's so much British slang.
Oh yeah, there would
Just
be.
like, yeah.
Absolutely. Alright, so we've got our initialize method in. Okay, and so go down below person now. Alright, comment out the main code you've got there. Okay. And what we're going to write is some test code for our address class. So I'm going to go test address. So I'm going to create a new instance of address, a new class. And what do I need to pass to it? What's the first parameter? Scroll back up and have a look if you need to. So street, city, postcode. Does the order matter?
Yes.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Okay.
We allow you to pass in parameter names.
Sorry?
We allow you to set parameter names like street, colon, and
Named parameters. You
I
can't.
think so, because they don't work as key value pairs.
No.
Like that.
you have to use a hash if you do it.
But, yeah, what you could do is you could pass a hash.
Yeah.
Like have a single parameter which is a hash, and then have all your data in there, and then your initialize could unpack that hash,
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah.
Else it just works in order of arguments.
Order of
rather
arguments,
than, like,
yep.
a key value pair.
And this is a really niggling question, but just to meet international standards, are we using street specifically as the word with a capital S?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Really,
No, I'm just wondering, like,
Yeah.
yet again, best practices.
Well, it doesn't matter. It's just data.
When it comes to variable names, you're always going to use camel case and things like that, so it's always lowercase. When it comes to actual data, as long as it's uniform, that's the decision you make. per project,
Yeah. Is
I
that?
suppose.
Were you talking about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. yeah.
Well, that's just a piece of random data.
It's worth noting that, like, when it comes to stuff like this as well, you normally, like, you try and set best practices in regards to formatting data. But there's so many humans involved with the database and stuff like that, that when it comes to displaying that, you're going to display that string as all uppercase or as a capitalized thing or something like that anyway. Like,
Yeah.
the display of that
That
information
string's
is going to
always
happen
just
after you take it out of the database, as opposed to, like, trying to get all the data perfectly uniform.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, your data might be sourced from a file or a database or something like that, so it might already be in a specific format.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so we've created a new address. So let's use our accessors to make sure that everything's in there correctly. So we'll output the street, city, and the postcode. Okay, so let's run that program. Helps if I run the wrong one, the right one. Ah. What happened there?
Oh, we haven't got an accessor.
We haven't done the accessors? Oh, we haven't either.
No.
There you go. Thank you.
So cool.
So probably just do readers at the moment. So street, city, postcode. Now remember, they need to be symbols. Okay. But Ruby's smart enough to know that if I do an actual reader on a symbol called street, it knows that what I'm actually referring to is that. Because the names are the same, it's smart enough to make the connection between the symbol and the instance variable. Okay, so let's try that again. Okay, there we go. So we're up and running. All right. Yeah, I'm going to add an extra method to it because quite often I'll want to have like a nicely output the whole address on one line. You know, maybe with a comma in it somewhere, so like a nicely formatted full address. So what I'm going to do is add in a method called full, and that's going to return a string with the street, a comma and a space, and then the city, a space, and the postcode. Okay, and let's test it by calling test address dot full. And there we go. You get a nicely formatted full address.
back up to the when you define it.
There you go. So does anyone not understand how that's working? How that's doing its thing?
Just trying to get it to run, Matt.
Yeah. So run that, and you should get an output like that. That bottom line there. So it should come out like that. Does everybody get that output? Now, we just learned this morning, because to me it's a little bit tedious, or could become tedious if I use it a lot, to have to keep calling full. What I'd much rather do is that. So how would I make that output the same thing? Yes?
This has just have it put inside the actual.
Without doing that.
Override the toString method.
The toString, yes. Remember we overrode 2s in the hamburger? Yep, so let's do the same thing here. So instead of calling this full, we'll call it 2s. You remember in the hamburger, it calls it automatically if we've defined it. We can prove that by running that again. We still get the same output, but now I don't have to call a method. I can just say puts test address and it works. It's good to actually put a 2s method on any class that you make, even if it's just for debugging purposes. So that, you know, you can just do if something's not working right, you can do puts in the object, and you get a string representation of the state of that object.
So because puts is automatically putting something as a string.
Yeah.
Anytime that's called and the method is, sorry, the actual.
Yeah, so Ruby will automatically call the 2s method because we've defined it. And then whatever that returns, that's what then gets sent to the puts to be output to the screen.
And if you just put p instead of the puts, that's not going to output the toString method.
If I just put what? Sorry.
P instead of puts.
Oh, p. Well, p won't do it. P will actually output the object. So like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we use p if we want to, like, get into the internals of the object. Okay. Yeah. So p will not call the 2s, but puts will.
Because it puts it in.
Excuse me, Matt.
Yes?
Sorry to be rude. I was just wondering, is there any chance you could chuck that in a snippet, please? Because I can't get it to run.
You can't get it to run?
Yeah.
Alright, I can. You probably just got like a syntax error or something, I would think.
Not real quick.
Yeah?
This isn't running. I have no clue why. It that's what error it's giving me.
These actually already programmed.
Okay, what line's that on? 27.
Yeah.
Put a blank line under your Atra reader line. Try that. Expecting end of input. Good. Alright, have you got anything going on above?
I've commented everything out but that and and when it creates the instance.
He just posted the program in the
It's just, like, what is it, type is usually that. You can always reference the instances that are actually in there.
Oh, street, colon, city, colon, postcode. Street, city, postcode, initialized. That's city.
In that class.
The issue was with
End the def, end the class. I can't see why that's what's wrong with that, to be honest. Well, 251.
Yes.
Well, how's that a syntax error? Unexpected keyword
So if we
end.
took the ads out in that, it should be fine.
Because that's ending the def, and it's even recognising that.
Yeah.
And then that's ending the class. So where's the problem here?
About me.
About the, so if it's
This
hashtag.
has
Yeah. So if we took out the ads, we should be fine.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
That's what I'm thinking. Maybe
Should I
that's
try
what
putting
you
it
do.
in
You
a
want-
new file?
you're running more classes, right?
Yeah.
More classes, are
Because I think that's one of the issues with
Yeah, try that.
Mm.
Try creating a new file and just copy and paste
Yeah,
just that
yeah.
without the commented stuff. I don't understand why that's not working though. That's really strange.
Yeah.
That's really strange.
I thought it was. It took a while for me to ask because I wasn't sure if I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gives you a keyboard shortcut.
I'd like to try and figure it out, see what was wrong with it.
This is
And what that will do is it'll automatically like indent.
Okay, so any questions at this point?
Letters in letters that we might see. It'll probably
Okay.
Oh, I did copy this one.
Now, what I want to do
So like function ended
is I now want the person to be able to have an address.
where you forgot it.
Okay, I want the person now to be able to have an address. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to use that new address class in conjunction with person. So we can now add addresses to a person. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, now usually in a case like this I like to write the main, so it's like this is what I'm trying to do. Okay, at the end of the day, this is functionality I want to achieve, and then go back to the classes and say, okay, what do I need to do to make that code work? Okay, and we'll see more of that when we get into something called test-driven development, which is best practice now, and that's where we write tests, which are kind of like little snippets of main code like we're doing here. We do them first, and then we go back and write the code that makes the test work. Okay, so let's do a similar sort of concept here. So what I want is, just going to take all of that out. So I've got my test address. Then what I want is I want to be able to make a person. And at the moment, what do I have to pass to a person? Name and a date of birth, right? And date of birth's just a year, isn't it? I think. We were just going like a year of birth. All right. But now what I would like to do is pass in that new address that I've created as a third parameter. So I want to be able to say, okay, this person is called John, born in 1945, and they live at this address.
Should address be one string, or is it going to be 3 separate values again?
Well, no, because here test address will be an entire address object, an entire instance of address. So that's what I want to pass in here. Okay.
would you have to put it in Arno? Okay, cool.
So how do you import it?
Okay, so how do we make that work for starters? What's the first thing we're going to need to change? We're going to need to change something in the person class. What do you think it might be?
So is that going to be in the initialization?
Sorry, what was that?
In the initialization, when you
Yeah, so in initialize, what am I going to need to do?
you just put the test address in there, or
Yeah, so I'm going to have to add that third parameter. Okay, because I want to pass a third parameter, I'm going to have a third parameter in my list here so that it can receive that value.
but because the instance has already been defined in the test address, you don't create a address,
Yeah, so
or you do.
like the other parameters, I'll copy that in to an instance variable.
So that it's going to be the same. Okay.
All right, so let's do a bit of whiteboarding again. This tends to sort of clarify things. Right, you can also go and drop the code into Python Tutor and see what's going on step by step. But I'll whiteboard it here.
So just double checking. So I think so. You call the actual method test underscore.
That's in main,
Yeah.
it's called that.
Yeah.
But for the purpose of inside the class,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what it's called outside.
Okay.
Yeah, that has no relevance at all. Because ultimately the only thing the class is going or the initialized method is going to care about is what is it called here.
That's another variable.
Yeah. What do we refer to it here? We're referring to it as address.
Yeah.
So what it's called outside of the class can be anything.
So we can then
It makes no
create a method
difference.
that defines the address is equal to.
That's right. Yeah. So we just copy it in.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The color of the
Just
address.
means we know how to do it.
Yeah. So let's go back down to the main. Okay. So let's see what's going on here. It's actually a fair bit. So line 87 there, creating the address. Okay, so first thing I do is I'm saying to Ruby, I want to create this variable called test address. So somewhere in memory, it creates test address.
Yeah, do that. Take that with it.
At the moment, it's nothing in it. Alright? Then I say create a new instance of the address object. So it goes off and does that. Or a new instance of the address class. Okay. And within that, it's going to create
Yeah.
name, was it street? And that has a value of 10 any street.
Yeah.
City, and that's going to be Brisbane. And postcode, and that's 4,000.
Yeah.
Are we following so far? What's going on? Yeah. And then I'm saying assign that into test address. But what new actually returns is not the object itself. Well, it doesn't return this whole thing. It returns a reference to it, or a pointer. So we put that in here. So it looks like that. So what's stored in this variable is nothing more than a pointer to this entity. Does that make sense? Kind of like its memory address, like where it is. Okay? So then when we go person one, so person one gets declared. Then we do person.new. And that's going to be, what are the three parameters?
Address that I've passed in.
Name,
Should be that.
DOB, now here's the interesting bit. Okay, we're passing in the value of test address, which is going to populate address. But what is that value? Does test address contain that, or does it just contain a reference to it?
Do we need to then put a pointer to test address?
Sorry?
Do we need to put a pointer then to test address, which then in turn?
Well, no, because the contents of test address is a pointer.
So
So,
you can't point to a pointer.
so that will, well, you probably could, but it'd get very confusing. So just like any other variable, when we pass it through as a parameter, the value gets copied out of that. So whatever value that has in it is copied and put into a parameter, which is then ultimately in their initializer. So that comes through into the postcode parameter, and then that value is then copied into the instance variable postcode. Sorry, wrong one. Looking for person. That's better. So that third parameter, test address, is going to be, whatever its value is will be copied into address, and then that will be assigned into our instance variable address. Alright? But because that's a pointer, that's what gets copied in. So because that's pointing to that, I copy that pointer in. See how it works?
So, can you go as deep as you want? Like, you can create two.
Yeah.
So you can go like inside like another data, inside another data.
Yep, you can nest them to whatever level you need.
It's like Inception.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy.
Yes. Yes. Yes, it is like Inception, exactly.
All key containers.
Dream within a dream within a dream.
Yeah, but
And it is a dream, really. Because if I switch off the power, it all ceases to exist. Do we understand how this works?
sorry, the lines up in
Right.
like those variables.
So by just passing through that reference and copying it in, we're now referring to the same object in memory. So it doesn't make a copy of the object, it's actually referring to the same one. Make sense? Sort of, maybe? Oh, and then finally, in main, once we've created person, it comes back with its own pointer and assigns it into person one.
Yeah, so it's I've created it twice, I don't know if that matters. Trying to create the same one twice.
So that's what we end up with
No, because like when you're
in main.
And then the form, it goes like test address, person one.
Yeah. So the interesting thing here is I have an object here, an instance of person, and within it I've got a reference to an object of a different class.
Oh, as in, like.
That makes sense?
It have to be separate. But
This is very, very, very powerful paradigm, being able to do this. We can make really complex software this way. Okay. Any questions about that? It is a little bit to get your head around. There's kind of a lot of moving parts there. All right. So we've established we've got our address in there.
I wasn't able to pass the address through.
You weren't?
No. We've got two of the same problems here.
Yeah.
We created the test address, and then when we're putting the test address into the person,
Yeah.
it's just returning the reference of the objects back. Like it says address number 972 blah, 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 blah. It's not giving back the
How
actual data.
you mean it's returning it back when you do what? Yeah. Are you?
This here,
Yeah.
and then when they say like puts,
Oh, so if you do puts, person person one?
yeah, do person one dot test address or address, whatever we have it set up as. Sorry.
Oh. Undefined method address.
Oh no,
Ah, that's because why
that's
do
not the same error we're getting.
why do you think that is?
No, it's just puts person one.
Sorry.
I'm only putting puts person one.
We're passing the object, not the.
So you're just outputting the whole object?
We don't have a method called dot. That's what I'm getting.
Yeah. Well, that is all you'll get because person is an object. All right. So a puts will only print out the class of the object and its unique ID.
So how would you access that data?
Ah, well, let's
So,
have a
yeah,
look
for
at that.
example, we have
Now, if you
trying to access person one address.
yeah
And then it's just this is my own lack of Ruby knowledge. So, they're getting back the reference object to test address, for example, the
Yeah.
reference ID, but they obviously want that.
Yeah.
So they stringify it first, right?
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
it needs
okay.
its own 2s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah.
Okay. Now, if I just change that to a P rather than a puts,
I thought P was the same as puts.
So you get the ID and
now
Yeah. Yeah. So
here you go. So here's my person object right here, and then in address, I've got my address object. So what I've got is I've got a relationship between the two objects. I've got one object referring to another one. And I can do that with as many objects as I like to any depth that I like, depending on what I'm trying to build. Now, in terms of depth, it's best practice to try and keep that as shallow as possible because it's easier to maintain. You know, we don't want to end up going 10 levels deep because you'll never maintain the thing. You just won't. Far too complicated to fit into a human brain.
And that's one of the largest issues with web development at the moment is like passing data from scope to scope and having it structured correctly. It's definitely.
Now let's say that we now want to get that address back out and display it. Okay, so let's try doing puts person1.address. So I want to pull that back out and I want to display it. What do you think we're going to get? Nope. What happened there?
So I thought it was a negative, but it's not.
Yeah.
He sees the update.
Oh, it's a plus.
Well, what does this error mean? Undefined method address. What does that mean?
I do genuinely believe that it would.
Yeah. So what do I need to do to fix that?
That's correct. That's not what it equals.
I know it's somewhere in there.
Create a method for address.
Okay. So what do I need to make that work?
There you go.
Are we still getting it to actually print out the data, not the reference to it?
Yeah, but I can't even get the reference at the moment. I can't get anything out of it. What do I need to get a an instance variable out of a class? Yeah, I need an accessor, right? So I'll add that to my attribute readers, and then we'll run the code again, and there we go.
So how come that worked, Matt? Because now it knows that address is a method because you define that in SSS.
Yeah, because I've supplied an accessor, yeah, then it knows now how to get the address out of it.
I don't want the reference.
Yeah, in the form, it's HTML address.
Right, does anybody not understand what happened there? How that worked?
Can I see the call and the initialization?
Yeah, giving it full access. So you're letting it. I'm holding it.
Still can't get it to work. I don't know what it is. Oh, we're trying to. Oh, it's because I haven't created person before.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Yeah.
So yeah, until then you're saying the address is at that, but you don't have one again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but you're trying to pass.
Oh yeah, I was trying something else, but when I had add rows, it was just coming up with the object.
Because you don't have a two-string.
Because you don't have a two-string. Alright, so guys, when you run it with this puts here,
But normally it's not.
do you get the address back out? Who doesn't get that? You'll get that? Okay, cool.
So why are we doing that?
Yeah.
Like, not
Yeah, so if we just do that,
yeah, that's not.
yeah, the reason being is because we don't have a two-string method, a 2S method in person. We've got one in address, but we don't have one in person.
That's guaranteed. That'd be a fun program. Yeah, actually.
Okay, so it's
Okay, who got that working to that point? Everybody? Yeah, we all got it good? Okay, awesome.
It's just putting something into the array.
Alright. So, this works, but for my money it's not ideal. The reason being is because I have to create the address separately myself in main and then pass it to person
There you go.
when I create person. Okay, which as I say works, and in some scenarios that may be what I want to do. But what if I decided that it's much more convenient if I just pass the street, the city, and the postcode to the person constructor, the person initializer, and let that take care of creating the address internally? How's that sound? Or in other words, what I really want to do is this.
So that will return that string to .s basically.
Does that make sense? So this way I can just do it all in one go. So what's the first thing I'll need to do to make that work?
So I can now assign that.
Well, I'm not passing in an address anymore, am I? What am I passing in?
Okay. So that'll store.
Well, let's have another look.
Object as that address variable.
So I'm passing the street, the city, and the postcode, right?
But it's the same behaviour as the address.
String.
Yes.
That will assign that to the variable.
Can't we just inherit from the address class?
Sorry?
Can't we just inherit from the address class?
Well, we don't want to do that because the reason being is because the idea of inheritance is that the subclass is a type of the superclass, the parent class, but it doesn't make any sense to say that a person is an address.
Every person has an address.
Yeah, person has an address, yeah. So what I need is I need to add the street, the city, and the postcode.
So now.
Put that in the
so
accessor as
now,
well.
Address has been stored in there. It's been stored as the whole object rather than the address, but we've converted it to.
Okay, now, what I could do here is I could store the street, city, and postcode as 3 separate, so rather than having an address, I could do this.
I would need to be a bit more consistent with my
Right?
name.
But I don't want to do that. Why don't I want to do that?
Class here and a little class
So
here.
Sorry?
it's all an address. It's all part of the address.
Very good. Yeah, I've already got a class that has that data, or has the capacity to store that data for me. Okay? And I want to use that. I want to use an instance of that to store this data.
I need to have.
So rather than doing that and storing it in this object, let's create a new address, new instance of address, pass through the city, the state, and the postcode. Right? It should be street, city, and postcode, shouldn't it? My bad. So we pass through the street, city, and postcode from the parameters, create a new instance of address with that, and then put a pointer to that into our instance variable. So we've still got a reference to a new address like last time. It's just that instead of having to create it in main and then pass it in, we're just passing in the street, city, and postcode, and then in our initializing person, that's taking care of creating the new address for us. Does that make sense to everybody? Is anybody not following that? Well, what we've just done is an example of composition, because we've made part of the state of this object is another object. So we've composed the two together. That makes sense?
So if you was to change that address class
Mhm.
down the road, you'd have to come back. Like, let's say you change it so much so that it requires 4 parameters instead of 3, and it doesn't have an optional. You will then have to come in.
You would then have to come in and change this, yeah.
Yeah, which is where planning your data structures and things like that saves you 1,000 hours down the line.
Now what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the About Me, and we're going to add a line to output the address. All right, so we can just use address, because we know address has a toString method. So we don't need to extract the individual components and build a string, because we know that the address class will already do that for us. Right, that functionality is already there in address. And it's a toS method, so in person we can just refer to it. And Ruby will automatically call the toS method, because we're interpolating it into a string. Is anybody lost? Please say so if you are.
I am completely lost.
You are? Okay.
It's just, I've been a bit behind trying to get the code to work, so
Ah, okay. All right. Well, I can come and work with you, and we'll get you up to speed. All right. So does everybody else understand that? What's going on there?
So how would we get it to print like that? We'd have to do dot about me. Okay.
On the person. So if we do that already has puts in it, doesn't it? So we don't need to puts on the front.
I got it now.
There we go.
Just trying to figure out, actually I'm getting an error now, I must have missed something. So with the person, you've got the accessor for the name, the date of birth and the address.
Yeah.
So in the initialization, I'm getting an error back saying that I've got too many arguments. I've got the 5 inside the initialization.
So you got 5 there.
I've got 5 there, and then I've got exactly what you've got.
You got 5 when you're calling it.
5 there, but it's saying that it's been given 3 and an expected 5.
Give me 3. Expected 5.
Inside the initialization. Yeah. But there's 5 well, yeah, there's actually there's 5 just very
That's how you make it.
called into the actual which is the initialization.
Yeah, but I
the only thing I missed was having 3.
But at the same time, like, I don't know how realistic these solutions are. Like, for the business sense. They don't make
yeah, so what we need is we need to make those three.
Well, the useful thing about frameworks is that you get really good at solving computer science questions,
So that way we don't
and
need to.
you don't necessarily discover how to, gel reactors, like, or
Makes sense. Yeah.
We removed that pointing at it.
That's right, yeah, because now I've set it up so that I can just pass the address details into the person initializer,
that's all it is.
and then the person, that initializer,
Get to one.
that then takes care of creating an instance of an address.
Yes, also.
So that way we don't need to do it outside in May. It'll take care of it.
Nice neat tie.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
So-
I feel
so-
like you're going to throw a wrench in the wax in there, but you should be doing
No.
it.
I send you a link.
No, there's no wrench.
Try clicking that link.
But that one PM that you had there only had
Are we going to?
so that person wanted that was
Yes, we will.
I'm just checking because otherwise we're going to go for a break.
All right. So, any questions on any of that at all? It'll take some practice to really get the hang of it. Because now we're getting really sophisticated. You know, we're composing objects together, and you know this is real next level stuff. Okay, not easy to get your head around, but definitely possible. Okay, so don't give up. All right, so let's take a lunch break. We'll be back here in 1 hour where we will talk about inheritance.
I just got the same